What's up, guys? Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling, and today we are talking TNA Turning Point, a very weird TNA show because it was held in a convention center during what seemed like a wrestling convention. So it wasn't filmed with the normal cameras, it wasn't in a normal arena. It felt like it had a gymnasium indie vibe to it. And it was just a super weird feeling throughout the entire show. Like a lot of bad camera work, bad mics, just the production of it was really bad. But fortunately, I don't really feel like that inhibited the wrestling at all. There was still some great stuff on this card to watch, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to go through every match on this card, give my review of the match, what worked, what didn't work, directions for the future, and a rating out of 5 stars for each one. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments below. If you like it, please consider subscribing or leaving a like, as it really does help me out. But with all that being said, let's get into it with our first match. So first up on the card was Frankie Kazarian versus Mike Santana, and it was a pretty good match. Pretty good way to open the pay-per-view. Nothing amazing, just solid throughout. They hit a lot of moves in the match, and that was pretty much the story. Them hitting a lot of moves. What they did hit, to their credit, everything looked effective, everything was clean, everything was timed well, the sequencing was very well. It was, I wouldn't go so far as to say exciting, but it was entertaining to watch throughout. But one thing I will say that I feel was a little detriment to this match, especially for two guys like Santana and Kaz, two just like veterans of the industry. They've been working for so long in so many different companies. To have a match like this, a pay-per-view opening match, and not display any character is sort of a bummer to see, because they can do it all throughout this year. Every match I've seen with Santana and with Kazarian, they've done such an effective job at displaying their characters through the story of the match. And that was just really non-existent in this bout. It was just a lot of moves, no real story, no real characters. And that did hold it down from being something that was truly great or something that was memorable. This was just a TNA match that was good. You enjoyed watching it, but I'll never go back and watch in the future. So I gave it a respectable 3 3/4 out of 5 stars. They definitely could have done better, but for what it was, very fun. The second match on the card was the Turkey Bowl match, which the stipulation for this is essentially the loser of the match, the person who takes the pin, has to wear a turkey costume or else they are fired. Apparently, they've done this match before. I've never heard of it. It was a pretty dumb stipulation and not a great match. Commentary the whole time was really trying to put over, like, oh my gosh, can you imagine the loser's going to have to put on a turkey costume? That's so embarrassing. They're going to be so embarrassed. And it just didn't work. Like, them trying to build it up a little bit, make it seem like this big embarrassment, just didn't work. Nothing could put over how goofy this stipulation was. And it is meant to be goofy. It's meant to essentially be a comedy match, I guess, but it really wasn't played that way. Like, the guys in the match were trying to have a good match, but they just really couldn't escape the stipulation that was holding them down. And the competitors in this match were kind of wonky. Like, some guys being in there, I get. Like Brian Myers, he's a tag team guy. For a long time when he was in WWE, he was treated as like the lowest of low card babyface. So he can go into this match, survive it, and come out the other side. Same thing with Rhino. He's a veteran, so him being in these fun, goofy matches is all right. But then they had Joe Hendry in there. And Joe Hendry is someone who you're trying to build up as a competitor for the TNA World title. He is supposed to be in the title picture. He's wrestled for the title this year. And you're putting him in this joke stipulation match. That just doesn't make sense. And even more so with Hammerstone. Hammerstone is a guy who thrives on aura, someone who looks the way he does. Their whole gimmick is based on the crowd reception to them. And putting him in this match just sort of eliminated that. It made him look like a joke. And now I'm not saying, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Hammerstone is done in TNA. He can't recover from this. Obviously, he can and he will. It was just a weird choice to put him in this match. And also, it seemed like he got shoot injured at the beginning because he was moving slow throughout the entire thing. And I don't really know what was going on with him. He muscled his way through, but I think he was legitimately hurt. So in the end, Brian Myers got the pin. He had to wear a turkey costume. He tried to refuse to put it on, but all the other competitors in the match forced it on him essentially. Dumb stipulation. The action wasn't great. It was pretty middling. 2 out of 5 stars. Next up was Moose facing off against Laredo Kid for the X Division title. And when I was looking at the card prior to watching this show, I had the highest expectations for this match. Not only are both guys great wrestlers, but they also have a pretty unique clash of style. Moose being just the hoss of all hosses, the big guy, the bully, the person who can do the power moves, throw the smaller guys around. And then you have Laredo Kid, who is that smaller guy and who can do those hot babyface comebacks and do his flippy dippy moves all over the ring. So it was a very unique clash of styles that really should support these guys in building a great match. But it was just sort of mid. Like, there was not a whole lot to it. It was probably under 10 minutes. Nothing really that exciting happened. Like, there were a couple cool dives. Moose did a cool power spot or two. But just the stuff they really do in all of their matches, pretty much. In matches like this, thrive on uniqueness. They thrive on their ability to pop the crowd and to show them insane stuff. That's what this match's purpose is. When you have a luchador going up against an ultra heavyweight, that's the kind of stuff that you should see, the stuff that really gets the fans out of their feet. And that just never happened. This match really felt like it was building to a crescendo that just never came. It just, they built a little bit and then it was over. And there was nothing really more to it than that. And I don't know if I'm being an extra critical on this match because I had such high expectations for it, because I thought it was going to be so great and it fell short of that mark. But I was just generally unimpressed with this. I feel like they went out there and, obviously no heat on the wrestlers for this, but I just feel like there was so much more they could have done. And maybe they had to hold something back because of the time limit. Maybe they just didn't have a proper story going into it. I don't know exactly what it was. Just a pretty mid match overall. 3.25 out of 5 stars. Next up was Josh Alexander versus Steve Macklin. And once again, a pretty good match, but nothing great. They were having a hardcore match. There was probably some other name for the stipulation, but essentially it was just a hardcore match. And I don't like dunking on guys for having a hardcore match, but I just never really think they're that entertaining. This is pretty much every other hardcore match you've ever seen, where they had spots with tables and doors and chairs and sticks and a whole bunch of stuff. But none of it was really as entertaining as if they were just having a standard singles match. And I can say that because I've seen them have standard singles matches before, and they're way better than this was. And this had some fun to it. I like the part where you thought Steve Macklin was bringing out thumbtacks, but actually it was bullet casings instead. That was a lot of fun. But other than that, it was pretty standard stuff. All well executed and all entertaining in their own right, but nothing really unique. And honestly, the whole time I was sitting there, I was thinking, it would probably be a hell of a lot easier on these guys' bodies and a hell of a lot more entertaining for me if this was just straight one-on-one. So I gave it 3.5 out of 5. Next up, Ace Austin teamed with the Hardy Boys in a trios match, taking on Kushida, Zachary Wentz, and a surprise entrant, Matt Riddle. And seeing Matt in TNA was a lot of fun. Ever since he left WWE, I've only seen him on a few random, sporadic New Japan appearances. So getting him to see back in front of a North American audience, a lot of fun. And this match was a lot of fun. There was an interesting dynamic in it where pretty much every guy was operating as a babyface, and they had this mutual respect for each other, every single guy in the match. So while they were still trying to beat each other, they weren't necessarily trying to hurt each other. It seemed like everyone was trying to outperform one another. And that made for some really cool spots. And really, all I can say about this match is it was a lot of fun. Even the Hardy Boys, I felt like the Hardy Boys got in, did their signature spots, got their stuff in, and got out and didn't overstay their welcome. Zachary Wentz and Ace Austin really carried this match for me. They were the best parts of it. They were in there for the majority of the time, mixing it up with other people's on the team, and perfect two guys to fill those roles. I do feel like there was a little bit of a weird dynamic since there was no heels in the match. There wasn't really a way to get heat, so they couldn't really tell an effective story. Having babyface versus babyface matches, especially in a multi-man setting, can be really difficult, and I never feel like they really struck the tone here. But that shouldn't take away from the match. Really well crafted, a lot of really fun spots, and everyone in the match was used effectively to bring the most out of it. So I gave it a solid 4 out of 5 stars. Next up was Jordynne Grace versus Masha Slamovich in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the Knockouts champions. And this is a pay-per-view card with only one women's match on it. Surprise, surprise, a North American wrestling pay-per-view with only one women's match on it. Who could have thought it? But for what we got, for the one women's match we did get, it was a damn great match. Masha Slamovich and Jordynne Grace have sort of this historic rivalry in TNA. Definitely one of the best TNA Knockouts rivalries ever. I personally think it is the best, and this was their best match that they've had together. All of the action was absolutely perfect. It looked 100% effective. Everything was so smooth, so beautiful. The sequencing, the choreographing, everything was perfect. And they told an interesting story throughout the match, and each fall sort of represented a different style of wrestling. In the first fall, or working up to the first fall, they were doing a lot of chain wrestling in the ring to start and then doing a lot of brawling on the outside. And in the second fall, they were doing a lot of their signature moves on the inside, what you would typically associate sort of this big pay per view match to be. And it really felt like they were building to that third fall perfectly, where they were going to start building to their heavy, heavy moves, their signature and finishing maneuvers to really put over how much of a war this was. But then you got to the third fall, it lasted like a minute and a half, and Masha Slamovich just hit a pile driver and won. And that was it. It was sort of anticlimactic. It was really sort of like a wet fart to end the match on, because it felt like they were building to this big, grand payoff that they just never came to. And it sucks that they didn't hit that. And I don't know why they didn't hit that. I'm not blaming the wrestlers for that. I don't know if it was time restraints or what it was, but they just never got there in the end. And it sucks because the first 15, 20 minutes of this match were just incredible. They were amazing. This was easily on its way to a 5-star rating if they nailed the ending, but they just didn't. There was just like I was sitting there on my couch watching this and I went, "Whoa, it's over." I was expecting there to be another 5 minutes at least. It just felt like a stunted way to end a match. And really, it was an incredible match beforehand. So it was such a shame to see it ended in that way. But don't make that feel like you should not go out and watch this match, because it is absolutely well worth your time. The best TNA women's match I've seen all year, with the exception of probably Will Ospreay versus Josh Alexander, probably the best TNA match I've seen this year. Really great stuff. Definitely worth your time. 4.5 out of 5 stars. And now we're on to the main event for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. It was Nick Nemeth defending against Eddie Edwards. And I can't call this match a disappointment because I didn't really have any expectations going into it. It was pretty standard to boring stuff throughout. Nothing really that exciting in it. And especially coming off the women's match, where of course I don't know what happened, but it feels like they got the end of their match snubbed for time. So then seeing this match go out that really didn't have any right being a pay-per-view main event, and you know it's going to go 20 plus minutes, it just would have been so much better if they cut 5 minutes off of this, given it to the women so they could have finished that story. Because while this was good throughout, all the moves were executed well, it was just every match you've ever seen. There was nothing to really love about it, and there was stuff to dislike. When like when Brian Myers and JBL did their run-ins at the end, it was just sort of like, okay, fine. Another title defense for Nick Nemeth on pay per view. I guess it was all technically well worked, very sound, no clear botches or anything like that. Just nothing I was excited for. No good story and nothing really to wow me. So I gave it 2 3/4 out of 5 stars. A perfectly fine match, not something you would go out of your way to watch, not something that's ever going to be memorable, and it just felt like a low point after coming off of the women's match. And those are my thoughts on TNA Turning Point. Pretty much what you've come to expect from TNA this year. A pretty good tag match, an awesome women's match. Mike Santana looks awesome, and everything else was just sort of mid. Unfortunately, this time, including the world title match. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you think I'm being too harsh on the world title match, or maybe I'm being too harsh on Moose versus Laredo Kid. And let me know what you guys thought of the women's match down in the comments below. Was it the best TNA women's match of the year? Was it in contention for the best women's match of the year? Full stop. Let me know down in the comments below. I have been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.